It's backbreaking and it's dangerous. Some even describe the business as archaic with outdated work practices. But others say it's a necessity that allows the poor to make ends meet. Hundreds of thousands of people in Asia are hired to break down most of the world's old ships at scrapyards, where worker safety is questionable.
Roughly 45,000 of them, and they come in all shapes and sizes. Container ships, cargo vessels, tankers, ferries, and cruise liners. 80% of goods transported in the world is done through ocean shipping. So just when do vessels reach the end of their sea life?
It really depends whether or not she is useful at the end of 15 years and can make money. Every 5 years, I should say, a ship comes up for a special survey, and that means that she has to meet regulations, and that means that there may be costly repairs.
The stakes are high in an industry where analysts say big profits are harder to come by.
It's a very difficult business today because it's a very, very competitive business.
Safe labor practices were virtually non-existent.
The first thing you see, you've been transported to another century. It's an operation which doesn't belong to the end of the 20th century. Belongs somewhere in the 18th century. And it's a kind of operation one would imagine when one has read about industrial operations in England. It's completely manual. There is no labor, occupational safety, and it's completely exploitative of labor.
It seems that's an assessment that's hard to dispute, as Focus Asia found out. When we traveled to Lakhitar-Bindar district, residents were reluctant to speak about the shipbreaking yards, let alone admit they existed in their neighborhood.
And these dangers arise primarily because of the nature of ships. Ships that have been built in the last 30 years tend to contain a number of hazardous substances.
National treaties against the shipping of toxic waste exist, such as the Basel Convention, which prohibits developed nations from transferring toxic materials to third world or developing countries. But the convention has a loophole. It doesn't cover the actual shipping of old toxic ships themselves.
Hey guys, welcome back to my YouTube channel here. It's me here, Comrade Lavender here, and today I'm back with another anti-capitalism deep dive, anti-capitalism true crime YouTube video topic today. Today I want to do the pure evil, the shipbreaking industry files deep dive, true crime, pollution, and waste colonialism on the global south. Disclaimer, before I get started in this YouTube video topic, I've already talked about waste colonialism in the fashion, textile industry, on the global south. I've talked about the leather industry, waste colonialism. I've also talked about the e-waste, waste colonialism on the global south as well, with electronics. If you want to check them all out, they'll be on the screen right now. But before we get started, all my YouTube videos that relate to this topic will be right now on the screen right now if you'd like to check them out. So let's get started in this YouTube video topic. Until the 1960s, shipbreaking was considered a highly mechanicalized operation concentrated in industrial nations and countries, mainly in the United States, United Kingdom, Germany, and Italy. Over the years, it has gravitated towards countries with low labor costs, weak regulations, and occupational safety and limited environmental enforcement. Supply of iron and employment are two of the main economic arguments behind allowing shipbreaking to occur. In Bangladesh, shipbreaking contributes to meeting 25 to 30% of the total iron demand and employs around 3,000 permanent workers. Scrap metal dealers often re-register ships before their last journey to the beaches of South Asia. The flags of convenience being countries in the global north can wash their hands away of any responsibility for the toxic impacts their ships will cause in those countries. How rich nations dump old cargo ships, cruise ships, oil tankers in the global south. Decommissioned deep-sea vessels are floating toxic waste sites. Their disposal is laborious and very costly, and regarded to as a menace by those who want to protect both the workers and the environment as a whole. Because capitalism companies only care about profit and putting profits over lives on a daily basis, they just dump their problems and ships on the global south, including Africa, South Asian beaches, etc., where they poison the waters, endangering biodiversity, marine wildlife, and endanger the workers via OSHA-not-approved workplaces and workers' health from the toxic pollution these ships emit. Modern-day imperialism and the global waste trade. The global waste trade has severe environmental justice and public health implications for people across the world and the earth. Despite its name, the global waste trade is not an actual trade. It's an extractive process with imperial roots. As an imperial nation, such as Britain, European countries, or the United States, etc., outsources waste management to developing nations across the world to deal with their contaminated plastic recycling waste. Beyond the severe scientific and environmental implications of marine life damage, soil degradation, and air pollution, there are also socio-political issues that arise from the global waste trade. These issues disproportionately affect the people, planet, and organisms living in developing nations. From Morocco to Ghana in Africa, Vietnam to Turkey in the Middle East, and much more countries, mountains of toxic electronic waste, plastic packaging, textiles, dumped corroding rusty ships and cargo ships, etc., and hazardous materials always end up piling up. Waste colonialism is a stark reminder of global inequality where self-proclaimed developed nations export their waste to the global south. The real reasons why huge cargo ships, cruise ships, etc., oil tankers, etc., end up on the global south beaches are there because of their steel hulls and frames. Steel is where the real profits are to be made, where owners can make millions of dollars. For examples, places like Alang and neighboring Sovia used to be simple fishing villages of India's northwestern coast. Today they are famous, or rather infamous, because the shipwrecking yards are now taking up miles of beaches along the Gulf of Camacat, where Arabian Sea cuts into the state of Jurgat. These shores have thus become boat cemeteries. Every year, around 1,000 ships are scrapped. 65 to 75% of them end up on one of 3 breaking beaches in India, Pakistan, and Bangladesh. 2 men were unalived while working at the RKB Group-owned Honey Shipbreaking Yard. A couple of victims fell victim to an industry often seen as providing the most dangerous jobs in the world. A victim of this trade was only 33 years old, and on August 31st, 2018, as on every other working day, he woke up around 6 in the morning. His 8-year-old son and 2 daughters, aged 6 and 4, were still sleeping, but his wife was already up and preparing their breakfast. 6 years ago, he had managed to get a job at the shipbreaking yards. Situated about 3 miles from their house, he knew how rare it was for a kologi, originally a fisherman's casquet, but now mostly day laborers in seasonal agriculture, to find work in that type of industry. What transpires is that a piece of the ship's hull must have broken off unexpectedly, taking him with it as well as another victim of capitalism. The gas cutter who was cutting through the steel on the ship's 9th floor to create an extra exit. None of the workers were wearing safety belts, nor were they required to. According to the shipyard's owner, they are working inside the ship. Only the cutters working on the ship's exterior must wear safety belts, a OSHA violation just waiting to happen. When he had the accident at Honey Shipbreaking Yard, he was brought to the public hospital. It takes more than an hour to cover that distance on the narrow 2-lane road, full of speedy bumps, stray cows, trucks, and clogged traffic. There is a small 10-bed clinic run by the Indian Red Cross along the Alang Hospital, which has 20 beds, but these do not have the equipment to deal with serious situations or serious injuries. These infrastructures are completely insufficient to meet the demand and needs of almost 160 yards in Alang, on which 15,000 to 30,000 workers dismantle huge ships under extreme conditions, risking their limbs and their own lives. The numbers given vary with each interview, and the official statistics are not available since most labor is informal anyway. When they asked his family what they expect from the owner of the shipbreaking yard, the answer came instantly: nothing. Their answer reflects centuries of humiliation and marginalization. They poor have never been able to expect anything from the wealthy or upper classes. His brother and nephew still don't know whether the family will receive any compensation whatsoever. This victims of capitalism's tragic story invokes a threat to the lives of so many others, tens of thousands of men who support themselves and their families, dismantling huge ships with little to no protection on the beaches of South Asia, according to data published by the Brussels-based international NGO Shipbreaking platform. Every year, around 1,000 ships are scrapped, and 65 to 75% of them end up in one of three breaking beaches in India, Pakistan, and Bangladesh. Once a ship is destined for dismantling, it is considered to be hazardous waste under international law. In India, data from Industrial Safety and Health Departments show that at least 470 fatal accidents occurred in Ailing between 1983, the start of the local shipbreaking industry, but according to the Indian Supreme Court, the incidence of fatal accidents in the shipbreaking industry, 2 in every 1,000 workers, is higher than that in the mining industry, which is nevertheless considered to be the most accident-prone industry. At least 11 people have died after an explosion at a shipwrecking breaking yard in southwestern Pakistan. Local authorities say workers were dismantling an oil tanker in Gandhi when a gas cylinder exploded, causing the ship to explode and catch fire. Many lives were lost, and many permanently altered and changed from their injuries and burns. In 2009, the UN Special Reporter on Toxic Waste already described in a report the long-term risk of shipbreaking, a ticking time bomb. In shipbreaking yards, workers are often exposed to toxic chemicals, including asbestos dust and fibers, also lead paint, forever chemicals, and other highly toxic industrial chemical compounds which have been banned for decades but are still present in ships, especially older ships, as well as lead, mercury, arsenic, or cadmium in paints, coatings, and electrical equipment. Workers are often without protective equipment gear, and prolonged exposure to these chemicals risk of developing slow progression but fatal diseases, which may not become apparent until years after the exposure. This is a capitalism atrocity. This is a capitalism made cause disaster. Some of the pollution is directly related to the shipbreaking industry called the gravity method. This is when large parts of the ship are cut with a blowtorch and crash down onto the beach or in the shallow waters. The incredible impact of falling tons of steel, combined with the process of cutting steel using very high temperature gas flames, causes often toxic paints to be released into the sea and as well as the soil in the beach overall. The ships are broken during low tide, and all of the oil residues, heavy metals, and toxic substances overall that aren't cleaned up before high tide are spread across the entire marine ecosystem environment. Although all forms of asbestos are banned in 52 countries, there remain approximately 125 million people around the globe who are exposed to asbestos in their work environments. Recycling ships for scrap that cause the asbestos hazard is present and an international problem. Studies of shipbreaking or shipyard workers potentially exposed to asbestos showed a persistent pattern of increased mortality for lung cancer exposed to other heavy metals found in parts of the ship, such as in paints, coatings, and electrical equipment, can result in cancers and also cause damage to blood vessels. Scientific research has located high amounts of microplastic fragments and pollution in the beaches around the shipbreaking yards, with 81 milligrams of small plastic fragments per kilogram of sediment. Other research has shown that high concentrations of heavy metals in the water near these sites. The toxic contamination from breaking these vessels into sellable parts is not restricted to the water or sediment.